Characters in order of appearance. Sir Edward Bainfield, retired judge. He would be surprised and hurt to know people hated him so intensely. Nivens, efficient English butler. Jane Talifaro, Sir Edward's niece who manages his financial portfolio. Miss Marty Pants, Sir Edward's secretary, helping produce his memoirs. The judge's elegant second wife, obsessed with her life of luxury. Harold No Money, desperately wants to marry Jane. Sir Percy Pewes, passed over for an appointment to the bench at the hands of his law partner and oldest friend. Paul Collier, an invited guest, recently released from prison. Cook, long-suffering domestic servant. Sergeant Boswell, veteran police officer. Inspector Honor Broom, newly promoted. A grand old country house somewhere in England, early on a summer's evening, sometime in the early 1930s. Act 1, Scene 1. At Rise, early on a summer's evening in the great room of Banfield Manor. The rumble of thunder and occasional flash of lightning threatens to let loose at any moment. Sir Edward Banfield gazes out the bay window. Nivens enters carrying a silver salver and approaches.
What are the gardeners up to, Nivens? Looks like they're putting something on the roses.
Pesticide, sir. Apparently the roses suffer from an infestation of greenfly.
Really? How effective is it?
Oh, my, extremely effective, sir.
Very interesting.
A telegram arrived for you, sir.
Of all the nerve.
Oh, not bad news, I hope, sir.
No, just a bad penny that keeps turning up. Jane's so-called fiancé insists on seeing me yet again. The man's a complete nuisance.
Your guest will arrive soon. Shall I send him away?
That won't be necessary. I know how to deal with irritating pests like him. Effective, you say? We'll see about that. By the way, Nivens, you may recall we're expecting a special guest this evening.
Very good, sir. The young man you mentioned earlier?
Yes, indeed. Paul Collier, a petty thief that I sent away several years ago. He's just now coming out of prison.
I do remember now. Pardon me for suggesting it, but won't the ladies find it awkward, sir? I mean, having an ex-convict on the premises?
He'll behave himself all right. As a parolee, he knows I can have him back in stir any time I want. No, I invited him because I wanted to see for myself whether he learned his lesson. I know a thing or two about human nature, and I'm convinced a man's behavior can be changed given the right inducement. I'm about to prove a point.
Oh, a little experiment. This should make for an interesting evening. Very good, sir.
Sir Edward exits and Nivens follows. Jane Talifaro enters. Miss Marty Pants enters. They give each other a hard stare for a couple beats before carrying on.
What do you have there?
Some correspondence Sir Edward needs to sign.
I don't think the judge will bother with those today. Not with guests arriving soon.
He's worked hard on this all week, and I happen to know it's going to come as big news to everyone.
Oh, really? Let me have a look.
You'll just have to wait. I wouldn't dream of spoiling his surprise.
I think I know my uncle pretty well, and I promise you, he's more interested in entertaining his guests than worrying about some boring old papers.
You don't even know what they're about, so mind your own business.
Ooh, you're going to regret that. I would drop that little Miss Efficient act if I were you. I'm not the only one who finds your performance laughable.
That's rich, coming from the financial genius. You may manage the judge's portfolio, But was it truly remarkable investing on your part, or pure luck? I wonder. Did Sir Edward receive all the profits due him? A little elf says they think not.
Whatever you think you know about my business, I advise you to stay well out of it.
I've got 3 words for you, Missy. East London Fidelity. That's right, the elf. Such a cute name for a bank, don't you agree?
Angrily, Jane whirls about and abruptly exits. Nivens enters pushing a liquor trolley.
Tell me, Nivens, what's all the fuss about today? Who are we expecting? I've never seen the judge so animated before. He's as giddy as a schoolboy.
Well, it's not for me to say, miss. I expect the judge has his reasons for not sharing.
Come on, you can tell me. After all, I'm helping write his memoirs and privy to his most intimate thoughts.
Then I'm surprised you haven't learned the judge's golden rule. Thou shalt be discreet.
Lady Eleanor Banfield enters and nonchalantly flicks a hand in Niven's direction. He immediately prepares her drink.
I hate these last-minute impositions. Now I hear we're expecting new guests tonight. Who is it this time, Nivens? Someone interesting, I hope.
I'm not sure, ma'am, although I overheard his lordship and Sir Percy arguing yesterday. Sir Percy was most insistent about coming this evening. He practically invited himself.
Oh, pooh, that's hardly news. Percy ought to take up residence here. The man can hardly stay away. Anyone else? Like someone fun?
I gather our visitor is someone the judge knew a long time ago. His lordship was vague when giving Cook her instructions. He's to prepare for 9 or 10. And ma'am, I'm afraid dinner will not be served.
No dinner? What are we supposed to do? Chew our nails? What sort of party is this anyway?
A telegram arrived earlier this week and another today. Perhaps that has something to do with the informality, ma'am.
No dinner, indeed. We'll see about this. I've had it with these last-minute changes. Probably some boozy old boor from one of Edward's clubs. This is an outrage.
Lady Eleanor rises quickly and exits. The doorbell chimes. Ding, ding. Nivens crosses to answer it. Nivens enters, followed by Harold No Money.
Oh, hello.
Good evening, Mr. No Money.
It's pronounced nominee. As you well know, it's French.
Of course it is. Why do I always forget?
Why, indeed. Have you seen Jane?
I haven't seen her all day. Perhaps she's with her new friend.
Friend? What new friend? Someone I know?
Impossible for me to say. Are you sure she's expecting you?
Of course she is. Why not? I demand to know about this so-called friend.
Harold takes an aggressive step toward Marty. She moves back and places a hand to her throat. The doorbell chimes, ding, ding, and Nivens goes to answer. Harold backs off. Sir Percy Pewes enters.
Hello, you two. Either I'm too early or too late. Hopefully the latter.
For safety, Marty moves closer to Sir Percy.
So very glad to see you, Sir Percy. I expect the others will be along any moment.
Jane enters, pauses momentarily in mid-stride when she spots Harold.
Good evening, Sir Percy. Has anyone offered you a drink?
I'll have my usual if you don't mind.
Very good, sir.
I wasn't expecting you this evening, Harold. What are you doing here?
I've come to see Sir Edward. Your uncle has a lot to answer for. I'm tired of him meddling in our affairs, and I intend to settle things once and for all.
Not today, Harold. It's not convenient. Go away before you cause a scene.
Then let's have a scene. What's he got against me anyway? Why won't he let us marry? It's not right, I tell you.
Give it a rest, you muttonhead. Your marital woes are not important at the moment. Settle down before I have Nivens throw you out. I see Sir Edwin summon you two lovelies as well. What's in store for this evening's entertainment, besides the obvious? I suppose our illustrious host feels neglected and needs propping up.
We thought you might know. I understand Sir Edward received some news this week. Do you know what it was about?
Afraid not, old girl. When his greatness calls, I respond. 'Tis our lot in life to serve our betters.
Ding, ding, the doorbell chimes, followed by a loud clap of thunder, causing everyone to jump. Nivens crosses to the door. Lady Eleanor and Sir Edward Banfield enter. Nivens announces Paul Collier. Paul enters hesitantly. He looks disheveled compared to everyone else.
Oh, my good fellow. So glad you could join us. Come, meet everyone.
Well, I'll be Paul Collier. Made the jump from Wormwood Scrubs to Banfield Manor. Quite the social climber, isn't he?
Don't be that way, Percy. Mr. Collier is our guest, and we must make him feel welcome. After all, he's paid his debts to society and is now a free man. Let's let bygones be bygones, shall we? Nivens, don't stand there like a shop window dummy. Get the man a drink. Allow me to introduce you to my wife, Lady Eleanor.
Pleased to meet you, madam.
I read about you in the newspaper. You've just come out of prison.
It's true I was sent away from my sins, but that was a long time ago. But I'm not the same man I was back then.
Let's hope not. And now you're here for what purpose?
I invited him. I heard Paul was being released and wanted to prove to all of you my instincts about human nature have always been correct. Like I always say, take a man out of a bad element and it'll change his life forever. Isn't that right, my boy?
Don't be a bore, Edward. You do go on about your so-called instincts. You claim to know whether someone has true criminal intent, but I think you're just a conceited old fool.
I don't just claim it. When I'm on that bench, I instinctively know, yes, I know, who deserves punishment and who deserves leniency. Don't lecture me about criminal intent. No one can pull the wool over my eyes.
Well, you probably saved my life, sir. Well, I'd be dead by now if I continued a life of crime. I suppose I should thank you.
Think nothing of it. I knew you'd see the light eventually.
Still spreading the joy wherever you go, eh, Judge? You gave the poor man 10 years for, what was it? Stealing a car? A bit harsh, wouldn't you say, old boy?
Nonsense. You can see for yourself the end justifies the means. Sure, I was hard on him, but it was for his own good. Mr. Collier seems to agree with me.
I wouldn't say that. I mean, to be sure, I resented such a harsh sentence at first, but I've learned so much since then. I mean, thankfully, I only saved 5 years. Got out early for good behavior because they could see I'm a changed man.
Did you hear that? An early release for good behavior. The man is living proof my instincts about human nature are spot on.
Sir Percy Hughes, please forgive my earlier outburst. I was surprised, that's all. Sir Edward and I practiced law together before he became a judge, that is. Congratulations on your release. I'm sure you'll quickly adjust to this crazy world of ours.
Hello, I'm Marty Pants. What an interesting story. I was fascinated by what you said just now.
Pleased to meet you. I assure you the pleasure's all mine.
Can't imagine being locked up in prison with all those thuggish brutes. It must have been terribly lonely.
Well, I've managed to adapt, you know. I haven't been in polite company for such a long time now. This is certainly a change of pace from what I'm used to.
Well, maybe I could show you around. A lot has changed in the last 5 years.
Give the man room to breathe. He just got free. Hello, I'm Jane Talafaro. I help manage my uncle's estate and keep the books straight.
She's far too modest. This young lass has made me a fortune. I couldn't manage without her. You'd be wise to let her show you how to invest properly. You won't be sorry.
I'll do that next time I'm rolling in money.
Marty moves close to Harold.
Don't you find Jane's new friend interesting? And so handsome, too.
So that's Jane's new friend, is it? We'll see about that.
Come on, everyone, drink up. Nivens, step lively, old son.
I brought those papers you requested, Sir Edward. If you'll sign them now, I can post them in the morning.
Most inappropriate, Miss Ponce. Why are you bothering me with such trivial matters?
I'm so sorry. I just thought...
You thought what? That I should neglect my guests? There's a time and a place, but this isn't it. Now be off, you silly girl.
You poor fool. But I did try to warn you. Now run along and stay out of trouble.
Sir Edward should be more careful how he speaks to people.
Cook enters, pushing a trolley laden with appetizers. She keeps her eyes and head down. Everything about her says she's not comfortable in this setting. Sir Edward sidles up to her. While pretending to look over the food, he tries to pinch her bottom, but she definitely moves out of reach.
Be careful, the dishes are hot.
That's not all it's hot. How about we get together later after everyone's gone?
No, Sir Edward, that would be wrong. What would your wife say? Shall we ask her?
Since when did she start caring? You can't say no to me forever. How about it?
No, thank you. I have the washing up to do.
Ladies and gentlemen, the feast has arrived. However, before we indulge, I have a little announcement to make. Tonight, we not only celebrate new beginnings for our guest, Paul Collier, but for myself as well. I've given it a lot of thought and have decided it's time to retire from the bench. I want to publish my memoirs. But that's not all. A few days ago, I received the most extraordinary telegram. I am pleased to announce that Eddie is coming home after all these years. He would have been here tonight except for delays on the high seas, to be expected, I suppose, but he will arrive by midweek. I know what you're thinking, and I'm as shocked as you are. After all, it's been 10 years since Eddie left. He now wants to reconcile our differences.
Congratulations, Sir Edward, I suppose. What a surprise after all these years. You'll forgive me for bringing this up, but I thought you told us Eddie had died.
Mistaken assumption on my part, old boy. I hadn't heard from him in years and assumed the worst. But thankfully, I was wrong.
So, what happens now? What does this mean?
Nothing changes. We'll carry on as usual, only there will be one more member of the household. It will be fine. Now, everyone, come taste these delicious savories Cook has prepared for us.
Nivens assists Cook in removing serving dish covers and glasses. They exit. Conversations are muted as the news sinks in. Sir Percy crosses to sit with Lady Eleanor. Marty approaches Jane.
My, oh my. I'll bet you can't wait to see Cousin Eddie. Soon you'll have two masters to contend with. I wonder how much that will cost them.
Marty sachets away.
One day I'm going to wring that girl's neck.
Forget about her. Listen, Sir Edward can't prevent our marrying forever. Will you tell him I'd like to have a word?
For heaven's sake, Harold, act like a man and tell him yourself.
Jane briskly exits. Marty observes Lady Eleanor and Sir Percy and assumes a listening attitude to better eavesdrop on their conversation.
How's that for timing? Just as the judge retires, the prodigal son returns. Does it get any better than that?
Of all times for Edward's son to rise from the dead. Why now?
What are you going to do about it?
I don't know. I need time to think.
Now would be the perfect time to run away together. My offer stands. Say the word and we'll leave tonight.
I've told you before I could never leave Edward. At least, not without my fair share.
Cut your losses and come away with me. Let me take care of you, my darling.
Dear Percy, you're so gallant. But I'm not leaving until I get what's mine, and that's final.
I dare say you won't see as much of his fortune as you think you will, not after Eddie gets home. What do you propose to do? Wait until Edward keels over before making your move?
It's all a matter of timing. Now that Edward's retiring, surely you're in line to take his position. You've waited all these years. Are you going to turn your back on that now?
I should have been on the bench years ago, except that Edward put the boot in, the backstabbing snake that he is.
Then take what is rightfully yours. You know you want it. It would be the ultimate triumph.
Serves him right, too. You get his money, and I take his place on the bench and his wife. As they say, all fair in love and war.
It appears we have a common problem standing in the way of our mutual happiness.
If you mean what I think you do, you can't be serious. We'd never get away with it.
You know I'm right. Logically, it's the only solution. Now listen to me. I have a plan.
Oh, great. A plan that will probably put a noose around both our necks.
Edward will likely go to London next week to change his will in Eddie's favor. Before he can do that, what if he met with a little, shall we say, misfortune? Something that keeps us both in the clear. Oh, I can almost see the headlines now. Retired judge dies in accident.
If I were inclined to agree with your crazy idea, and this is strictly hypothetical, I might know just the thing. There's a sharp curve along the old Oxford Road. If you're not careful, you end up going over the cliff. What if the judge never makes that turn?
That's brilliant, darling. You take care of this little problem of ours, and I promise we will be so happy together.
Lady Eleanor exits. Jane enters. Paul approaches Jane.
I couldn't help noticing the judge's announcement upset you. May I ask why?
I was quite shocked, if you must know. The last we heard, Eddie had died while roaming the outback of Australia. Now he's hale and hearty and on his way home.
And what was all that about being reconciled? Did something happen?
Family trouble. Lady Margaret found out about Sir Edward's affair with Eleanor. She was already emotionally unstable. Sadly, it didn't end well.
That must have been rough. Well, how did your cousin take it?
After his mother's death, Eddie denounced his father and left for Australia. That was 10 years ago. But it will be good to have him home again.
Hey, you don't have to convince me. I couldn't care less, but then I'm not the one who has to worry about my position.
Do I look worried to you?
That look on your face says yes. Sir Edward announces his son's coming home, but for you, this is not pleasant news. Tell me, what's troubling you?
The only thing troubling me is how everyone keeps sticking their nose into my business. I suggest you keep your opinions to yourself, Mr. Collier. This is a family matter.
You know, family troubles have a way of spilling over. Before long, everyone gets caught up.
Whatever do you mean?
Jane approaches Sir Edward.
What wonderful news, Uncle. I'm so pleased Eddie's coming home after all this time.
Yes, good news indeed. His telegram indicated he'd sold his interest in a gold mine. Can you believe it? I knew my boy would make good one day. Didn't I always say so?
Actually, I recall at the time you said he was a no-good waster and not worthy of your time or money, and then you disinherited him.
That was then, this is now. And thanks for reminding me. I must see old Trent about drafting a new will now that Eddie's coming home. Tell him I'll call round Tuesday. By the way, it's about time I had a full audit of all my accounts as well.
Is there anything the matter? Everything is in proper order, I can assure you.
I prefer to see for myself. As they say, you get what you inspect, not what you expect.
I must say, Uncle, that man you invited, there's something not quite right about him.
That's ridiculous. The man's harmless. You heard him. He learned his lesson the hard way. Don't go looking for trouble where there is none, my girl. Next you'll be seeing villains hiding in the bushes.
I dare say the villains are among us already.
Jane exits. Sir Edward crosses to join Sir Percy.
I see you and my wife are still conspiring against me. What are you up to now?
Nothing of the sort. We were just discussing the miracle of Eddie's resurrection. An incredible turn of events, to say the least.
And if I told you the best is yet to come, what would you say to that?
You're full of surprises, Judge, even after all these years. I wouldn't put it past you to disinherit the lot of them and give it all to that wayward son of yours. That's what I say.
The man is practically clairvoyant.
There's an unusually loud peal of thunder. Nivens, Cook, Lady Eleanor, and Jane return on stage and disperse. Everyone looks uneasy as the storm rages.
What are you afraid of? A little tempest? If you're that concerned, then I insist everyone stay over tonight. No sense in tempting Mother Nature on a night like this.
But I wasn't expecting to stay the night. I didn't bring a change of clothes or anything.
None of us did, my dear. It's just for the one night. You'll be fine.
I prefer a fresh change of clothes. I don't like wearing the same clothes for days on end.
Not that anyone would notice.
It's settled then. After a good breakfast in the morning, you can be on your way. Now, let's put some life into this dreary party. Nivens, let's have champagne, the really good stuff for a change.
Suddenly, one of the French windows flies open. The sound of the raging storm is loud. Harold and Paul secure the window. Just as they get it closed, all the lights go out.
Somebody find some candles. Nivens, get that blasted generator started immediately.
Nivens and Cook enter with lighted candlesticks. Nivens exits ostensibly to start the generator. Cook follows him out. Shortly, the lights come back on to everyone's immense relief.
Ah, that's better. Now, everyone, please, charge your glasses. I'd like to propose a toast. To our new friend, Paul Collier. From now on, may you know only good fortune.
To Paul.
To Paul.
And here's to a happy family reunion when Eddie returns to the bosom of his family.
To
Eddie.
Eddie.
Suddenly, Harold drops his glass, grabs his throat, and makes strangling noises. He struggles to breathe, falls to the floor, cries out once, and then lies still. Nivens and Cook enter quickly. Paul kneels down to check on Harold. And
It's no use. I'm afraid he's dead.
end of Act 1, Scene 1. Act 1, Scene 2. At Rise, 2 hours later, Harold's body has been removed. Sergeant Boswell interviews Jane.
It goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. I'm very sorry for your loss. When were you and Mr. No Money planning to marry?
It's pronounced no money. It's French.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
When were you and Mr. No Money planning to marry?
My uncle adamantly opposed the marriage, so we hadn't set a date. In fact, I don't recall Harold formally proposing. He could be so assuming, if you know what I mean.
Actually, I don't. Perhaps you could elaborate.
Let me put it this way. I never knew whether Harold was in love with me or the idea of marrying me. He was not very enterprising. I suspect he merely wanted an easy life. Besides, I had made up my mind.
Viewed that way, it certainly was a lopsided relationship. Before the deceased became, well, the deceased, did you two have a fight?
Nothing out of the ordinary.
Then it was commonplace for you two to argue. What did you argue about this time?
Harold was insistent on confronting Sir Edward, but Uncle refused to meet with him, so he asked me to intercede. Frankly, I couldn't be bothered. Getting married was more Harold's idea than mine.
Now those happy plans are dashed forever, owing to a tragic accident.
Happy? Oh, I hope you don't think me insensitive, Sergeant, but I've just been spared a disastrous marriage. Harold quite put me off the idea, but in a way, it's a huge relief. Are we finished here?
Jane abruptly exits. Sergeant Boswell goes to meet Sir Percy.
She can be a handful, Sergeant, but don't let that put you off. She's got a terrific mind for business and nerves of steel that any stockbroker would give his eye teeth to have. But she's vulnerable just now.
Vulnerable, eh? How so?
Well, she had Harold pulling at her from one side, and now she learns her long-lost cousin Eddie is about to arrive home. She's on a bit of a seesaw, I suppose.
That would be the cousin from Australia. Why should that be a concern?
Plainly speaking, it puts her further down the inheritance list. Until today, she was the judge's sole living blood relation. She and the lady of the house would have split the entire estate one day. But now the son will likely inherit the lion's share. And with Harold pushing her into marriage, you can appreciate she has a lot on her mind.
And where were you when Mr. No Money bought the farm, so to speak?
I was having a drink with Lady Eleanor. So typical of her. She was complaining she was bored to tears with the party and everyone there.
Bored to tears.
At that moment, Inspector Honor Bloom enters.
Take a seat, miss. Be with you in a minute.
If you don't mind, Sergeant, I'll take it from here.
What? Just who the heck?
Happy to meet you at last. I'm your new inspector.
Says who? I don't give a damn.
Oh, I'm glad to be here too. I see headquarters failed to notify you of my arrival. So typical of them. And I'll thank you to keep a civil tongue in your head, Sergeant. Inspector Honor Broom, at your service. And whom do I have the pleasure of addressing?
You're joking. On her broom. What an unfortunate choice of names.
As they say, a new broom sweeps clean. And that's exactly how I intend to conduct this investigation.
Sir Percy Pewes. The sergeant was just taking my statement.
Don't let us keep you from your investigation, Sergeant.
I don't know what's going on around here, and I don't give a damn.
Don't forget clues, Sergeant. We need clues. I suggest you go and find some.
Sergeant Boswell closes his notebook with a snap and exits, muttering to himself.
Well, this is one for the books, I must say. A suspicious death at Banfield Manor, and the police send us a woman detective. How quaint.
Not to worry. My knowledge of police procedure is unsurpassed, even by seasoned veterans like our esteemed Sergeant Boswell.
Oh, you have extensive experience, do you?
Well, to be honest, this is my first murder case.
From the look of things, your first case ever, I would imagine.
Shall we continue?
By all means. I was telling your colleague about the deceased, Harold No Money. Pardon me, it's pronounced No Monet, it's French. Anyway, the judge had just proposed a toast. when Harold collapsed right before our eyes.
French. Yes, of course it is. And what exactly was Mr. Namonet doing immediately before he collapsed?
Eating and drinking, same as everyone. He helped Paul Collier secure the window that flew open during the storm. Then the lights went out.
That was some storm.
It was indeed. Anyway, when the lights came back on, everyone helped themselves to champagne while Sir Edward proposed a toast.
So anyone could have picked up that particular glass, but it just happened to be Mr. No Money.
That's correct, Inspector.
And since no one else is showing signs of distress, we can assume Mr. No Money was poisoned, although the lab report will determine the cause of death.
You're quick on the uptake. What I can't figure out is who would want to kill Harold in the first place? He was a silly little man, but totally harmless. Certainly not a threat to anyone.
Not that we know of. Tell me, who stands to gain by his death?
That's just it. No one. He was always broke. By the way, keep an eye on our infamous house guest, Paul Collier. He's an old lag and just out of nick, if you know what I mean.
I am familiar with the inference, sir. I'd like to speak with the others now, so we'll talk again later.
Marty enters and waits expectantly when she sees Sir Percy is about to exit.
I was looking for the sergeant. Is he still around?
He's around somewhere. He'd better be looking for clues. And you are?
I'm Sir Edward's secretary, Marty Pants. Are you helping the police?
Inspector on a broom. I'm in charge of the case.
You're in charge? But what about the real policeman? I thought he was investigating Harold's death.
Let's be clear, Miss Marty Pants. I'm leading this investigation, and the sergeant is assisting me. So, where were you when Mr. No Money expired?
I was here with everyone else. We drank a toast to that ex-convict person, and also the judge's son, who's supposed to be dead. Now we find out he's alive, and well, if you can believe that.
What happened next?
It was horrible. Harold started choking and fell down and died.
Before that, did you see anything suspicious, like someone fiddling with the champagne?
No. But why would anyone kill Harold? He wasn't a very nice man, but he wasn't a threat either, except perhaps to good manners.
Rest assured, miss. We shall get to the bottom of this.
I think you should know there are some here with a perfect motive for murder, and others, in my opinion, who themselves deserve to be murdered.
What? Do you realize what you're saying? Who did you have in mind?
Why, Lady Eleanor, of course. She and her lapdog, Sir Percy. In fact, you should investigate him too. They've been carrying on behind the judge's back for some time.
The same Sir Percy I just met. Lady Eleanor is having an affair with him?
Silly men. They fall all over themselves for Eleanor. She went after the judge, and now she's going after Sir Percy. All she has to do is crook her little finger, and he comes running with his tongue hanging out. It's really too embarrassing.
Is Sir Edward aware of this liaison?
He is, and he's very annoyed about it, too. He once mentioned he believes they're conspiring against him.
Conspiring in what way?
To get his money, of course. Sir Edward's very rich. There's no telling what those two are capable of.
Why not confront them?
His reputation is at stake. The judge is very proud of his time on the bench, but if the affair ever came out, he'd look like a fool. He won't allow that.
As they say, pride goeth before a fall. Well, thank you for this information. Is there anything else you can think of?
No, except Watch out for that lying hussy Jane Taliaferro. She's up to no good as well.
You don't particularly care for Miss Taliaferro?
She's jealous of my relationship with the judge. You see, Sir Edward and I spend quite a lot of time together. As he often says, he can't do without me.
He actually says that, does he? You and the judge, close, are you? Not only his secretary, perhaps your relationship is a bit more on a personal level.
Nothing like that. Ew, he's old. As his private secretary, he confides in me quite a bit, more so than his own niece. She's supposed to be so smart about investing, but I think she got lucky once or twice. Pretends she knows what she's doing.
My, you're a fountain of information. If this secretarial thing doesn't work out for you, you might consider a career in police work. We could always use a good snitch.
Marty exits. Jane joins the inspector.
Excuse me, are you the inspector handling the case?
Yes, and you are?
Jane Taliaferro. I just wanted to say whatever she told you is probably a lie.
She being Miss Pants. Why do you say that?
She plays up to my uncle. She likes to pretend she's practically a member of the family, but she's only the hired help.
You don't like Miss Pants, I take it?
Not one bit. She enjoys creating conflict, then runs to Sir Edward when trouble starts, and she tells the most outrageous lie.
Lady Eleanor sweeps into the room in regal fashion.
Forgive my intrusion, but I must have a word with you, Inspector.
But I'm talking to the inspector.
Leave us now.
Ugh.
Lady Eleanor, I presume?
Tell me, Inspector, have you identified the culprit yet?
It's early. We've only started investigating. You have some information for me?
It's my husband. I believe he's trying to kill me. That poisoned drink was meant for me. I just know it. But somehow poor Harold ended up with it.
We don't know it was poison. Besides, anyone could have chosen that particular glass. What makes you think Sir Edward wanted to spike your drink?
He may be mistaken that my friendship with Sir Percy is more than it seems.
Have you given your husband any reason to believe it's true?
Of course not. Edward and Sir Percy were at law school together. Rowing club, all-night parties, old school ties, all that chummy stuff. Then they joined some boring old London firm. It's only natural Edward's friends are my friends too.
I see. So, if I were to tell you Sir Percy confessed the two of you are lovers, would he be lying?
He wouldn't dare say such a thing. We're friends, socially, nothing more.
Okay, I was just checking. I appreciate you setting me straight about things not yet in evidence. Is there anything else?
Are you aware we have an actual criminal on the premises? I should place him under arrest immediately if I were you. He claims to be a changed man, but I think he's a no-good thief and not to be trusted.
I am aware of Mr. Collier's presence here at the manor, and his criminal past as well. I assure you we're keeping a close eye on him.
Well, that's something at least. I don't want to be murdered in my bed under the noses of the police. I feel better knowing you're close by, even though you're only a woman.
Lady Eleanor abruptly exits. Angrily, Inspector Broom shakes her clenched fist at her retreating back. Paul and Sergeant Boswell enter.
Thought you might want to interview the house guest, ma'am.
Yes, thank you, Sergeant. Take a seat, Mr. Collier.
I don't know how I can help you. I just arrived this afternoon. I don't know these people.
Yet, Sir Edward invites a perfect stranger into his home.
Oh, not a complete stranger. You see, it was Sir Edward who sentenced me to prison for a relatively minor offense, I might add. 10 years for stealing a second-rate car, but he decided to make an example of me.
Why should the judge be so interested in an ex-con? I'm afraid I don't understand.
Because he's an interfering, self-righteous do-gooder. You know that lengthy sentence he handed out? Oh, that was not a punishment. Oh, no. It was time for reflection because the judge always knows what's best.
Did it work?
Yes, to the extent that I'll do whatever it takes to stay out of prison.
Sounds like the end justified the means, wouldn't you say?
If 5 years of your life is a trade-off for stealing a broken down old banger, then yes, total success.
You sound bitter.
Did you tell me, bitter? Not at all, and I suppose you wouldn't be either, right?
Did you tell all this to the judge? I bet not. I'll bet you were quite conciliatory.
Well, I didn't want to give Sir Edward an excuse to put me back inside. For all I know, this weekend is just a test and I'm a lab rat. If I don't perform properly, well then...
That bit about you being a changed man, was that for the judge's benefit? At heart, I suspect you're still a thief.
Ironic, isn't it? Thanks to Sir Edward, I learned more in prison about thieving than I ever would have on my own. And I hated Wormwood Scrubs. I'll never go back.
I don't blame you. I wouldn't wish prison on anyone.
Well, the thing is, the judge likes to control people, but always claims it's for their own good. Ask anybody.
All right, Mr. Collier, I appreciate your candor. I'm afraid I must insist you remain here at the manor until we conclude our investigations.
Take your time. I can get used to digs like these.
As Paul exits, Nivens enters with a trolley laden with tea and biscuits. They pause. Paul starts to speak, but Nivens silences him with a curt nod of his head.
I thought you and the sergeant might enjoy some refreshments.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Nivens. How very kind.
Customarily, it's simply Nivens, ma'am. The Mr. is superfluous.
Nivens exits.
You ain't buying that story, are you? I've never met an old lag yet who ran straight and true after a stint at His Majesty's guest. You heard him. He picked up a few tips on the inside he's anxious to try out.
You have a low opinion of your fellow man, Sergeant. Perhaps Mr. Collier really has learned his lesson, even if he was coerced into submission.
Don't go soft on me. Did you get that part about the judge interfering with people? He's a piece of work, too. Be careful you don't ruffle his feathers. He probably golfs with the chief commissioner.
Duly noted, Sergeant.
Nivens enters.
Nivens, may we have another word?
How may I be of service?
We need to understand more about Mr. No Money. What can you tell us?
May I speak freely, ma'am?
Of course. Whatever you say will be held in the strictest confidence.
In my opinion, Mr. No Money was like a housefly. And like a housefly, he was always hanging about, bothering people, a complete nuisance.
Don't hold back on our account. How do you really feel?
Perhaps I've said too much already.
No, go on. You're doing fine. It's just an opinion, of course, but who do you believe has a reason to kill Mr. No Money?
Well, it's really not for me to say. I don't want to jeopardize my position.
Do I have to remind you this is a murder inquiry? All information is important.
But naturally, I'm reluctant to speak out of turn. However, if anyone held a grudge, it would be Sir Edward. He detested the young man for constantly pestering his niece.
Did the judge dislike Mr. No Money enough to want him dead?
Well, not actually dead, but certainly out of the way. He was a nuisance.
So you said. Listen, we could use your help. What else can you tell us?
Well, you must understand, around here, I'm like a piece of furniture. I exist solely for the benefit and comfort of my masters.
Surely in your time here, you've picked up one or two things that are, shall we say, less than discreet?
If you mean the way Lady Eleanor and Sir Percy carry on, then yes. I may have noticed they are comfortable in each other's company, but that's all I'll say about that.
What can you tell me about Miss Pants and Miss Talifaro? What's their relationship like?
Like two alley cats circling for the kill, to put it mildly. always sniping at each other, always looking to outdo the other.
Oh, really? Tell me more.
Miss Pants is young and inexperienced. She tries too hard to impress everyone, but it only makes her look desperate. And she enjoys creating controversy.
She certainly has definite opinions about people.
Oh, too opinionated, if you ask me. I sense there's trouble brewing between the two young misses, but I stay right out of it. On the other hand, Miss Telefaro is educated, poised, and she knows how to invest money.
Do you know for a fact she's as good as people say she is?
If doubling Sir Edward's holdings counts for anything, I definitely say yes.
Doubled? That's quite impressive. Not something you chalk up to luck, I imagine.
Luck is for suckers, much like betting on horses. Investing in the markets takes time, patience, and a certain flair for how markets move. No doubt about it, Miss Talafaro is the genuine article.
Would you say the judge is dependent on her?
Oh, very much so. In fact, she manages his entire portfolio.
And Miss Pants, I suppose the judge is dependent on her as well.
I'll bet Miss Pants told you that, please.
That would explain the judge's animosity toward Mr. No Money.
It's a complicated household, but easily understood if viewed from the perspective of money. A most unhealthy attitude, but there it is.
That figures. Either you've already got money, or you're scheming how to get it.
Exactly.
Some things will never change. Thank you, Nivens. You've been most helpful.
Oh, and you might find Cook has an interesting perspective on things. She and the judge go back quite a few years.
By all means. Ask Cook to step in here, please.
If
Nivens exits. Cook enters looking like a scared rabbit.
it's all the same to you, Inspector, I think I'll follow up on a few leads elsewhere.
Thank you, Sergeant. Very enterprising of you. Please take a seat. I have a few questions for you, Miss...
It's just Cook.
Right. Tell me, how well did you know Mr. No Money?
Not at all. I'm not close to any of the family members, much less their guests.
Did you happen to overhear or see anything out of the ordinary prior to Mr. No Money's death? Something that stuck out in your mind?
I don't know what is ordinary for these people, only what's ordinary for me. I prepare and serve the food, clear away the dishes, and do the washing up.
Can you describe for me your relationship with Sir Edward?
I work for Sir Edward, have done for nearly 5 years now.
So there's nothing of a personal nature in your relationship other than that of employer and domestic servant?
What have you heard?
Nothing, but I know you're not telling me everything I want to know. Do we need to continue this conversation down at the station?
He may be my employer, but that doesn't give him the right to constantly bother me, the randy old goat.
Oh, you don't say. I wonder what Lady Eleanor thinks about that. Does she know?
Dear Lord, I hope not.
How long has this been going on?
He's made a few passes at me before, but lately he's got worse. He said that...
Go on.
He said recently, if I didn't go along, he'd send me back to prison.
You were in prison as well? What for?
It was a misunderstanding. They said I stole food from the last house where I worked, but it wasn't stealing. They'd have thrown the food out anyway, so I gave it away. There were people in our village that didn't have anything. I didn't see the harm, but the judge decided he would give me a break and brought me here as his personal cook.
Why not leave? You're not a slave here, are you?
In one sense, yes. He said he'd put me back inside if I tried to leave. It's been so long now. Well, I don't have anywhere else to go.
That's a shame. I promise to look into this on your behalf.
Please, no, you must not interfere. I'm tired of people meddling in my life. He'll send me back to prison and claim that it's for my own good. He's like that.
Not after all this time, surely. Besides, it won't come to that, I promise.
Cook exits. Sergeant Boswell enters with a satisfied look on his face.
Did you find something, Sergeant?
Yes, I found,
Yes, what?
excuse me. Yes, ma'am. As I was saying, I found a box of pesticide under the kitchen sink.
Well, goody for you, Sergeant. If we need any bugs exterminated, we'll know just where to go.
As the inspector is new, she may not be aware of the significance.
What are you yammering on about? What's so important about pesticide?
It's the content, ma'am. Pesticide is primarily arsenic trioxide, or white arsenic, also known as poudre de succession. That's French for inheritance powder. The aristocracy used it to bump off their relatives to seize the throne, and common folk used it to speed up the inheritance process.
French. Of course, it has to be French. Although that was very astute of you, Sergeant. I'm thoroughly impressed. And you know all this how?
I like to think of it as years of extensive field work, ma'am.
I take it the preliminary lab report came back.
And the lab report came back. The champagne consumed by Mr. No Money was, indeed, laced with arsenic. It's definitely a case of murder.
Right. Finally, we're getting somewhere. Be sure to check Mr. No Money's glass for fingerprints.
Inspector, you're not going to like this, but the coroner mentioned one glass has gone missing.
What? You're just now telling me this?
Sorry, ma'am. There were 7 people drinking champagne, but only 6 glasses were recovered from the scene. I checked just now. They're part of a set of 12. 6 glasses are back in the cupboard. Someone must have slipped the missing glass among the others.
How could this happen? And under our very noses, no less. This does not inspire confidence in police methods, Sergeant. Round up everyone. I want them here immediately. We're going to get to the bottom of this.
Sergeant Boswell exits to gather the household. Everyone files back in.
It appears we have some new developments. Enlighten them, Sergeant.
I have here a box containing pesticide, arsenic to be more precise. I found it under the kitchen sink. Can anyone tell me how it got there? Why would a cook keep arsenic in the kitchen? Having problems with creepy crawlers? Or do you use it for a bit of extra spice?
Not me, sir. I would never.
Then tell us where this pesticide came from.
There's plenty in the gardener's shed. Help yourself.
Have you used any recently?
Don't be daft. I wouldn't allow that muck near my kitchen. Why would I? Someone put it there to frame me.
Have you seen anyone near the gardener's shed lately?
Yes, the gardeners. You might want to question them.
Thanks for the tip. We've already established you have a very good motive for wanting to keep arsenic. Don't go anywhere. I'll speak to you later.
See here, Inspector, you can't believe Cook is a murderer. She's the most trustworthy employee I've ever had, save for Nibbins here. And he's the salt of the earth. There's no call to cast suspicion on anyone here.
There's more. A key piece of evidence has gone missing. The glass used to poison Mr. No Money. What can you tell me about that?
Anyone could have taken that glass. There was a lot of confusion at the time.
Such a thoughtful poisoner. Cleans the incriminating evidence and places it back in the cupboard. I suggest, Sir Edward, you were the intended victim, not Mr. No Money. His death was purely accidental. Do you have any idea who might want to harm you?
Nonsense. No one would dare do something so despicable. I can personally vouch for everyone here.
Everyone out. I want a private word with Sir Edward.
Sergeant Boswell herds them all out of the room and closes the door behind them.
Sir Edward, you cannot ignore the obvious fact we have a body. Who wants you dead?
If I had to single out anyone, it would have been Harold. But we know that's not possible. I cannot imagine anyone else wanting to harm me.
Have you considered your son's return creates a problem for someone? A twisted mind sees their problem as so extreme that murder is the only solution?
No, no, no. I made generous provisions for everyone named in my will prior to Eddie's telegram. He will be well provided for, of course, but no one can believe they will be inconvenienced by Eddie's return.
What if people don't know this and someone intends to maintain the status quo?
Then I'll disinherit the entire lot of ungrateful beggars. I might just do it anyway. No one tells me what to do with my money.
The sound of the door quietly closing causes all three to look around. Obviously, someone had been listening to their conversation. Inspector Broom motions for the sergeant to find out who was listening. Sergeant Boswell moves quickly, briefly exits, and then returns, shaking his head.
May I suggest you do nothing rash? Sit on it for a few days, at least until we can determine who tried to poison you.
I'll do what I can. But this is beyond the pale.
Nevertheless, you should take precautions. Trust no one. The poison in Mr. No Money's drink didn't appear by magic.
A grandfather clock in the foyer strikes the midnight hour.
It's late, so we'll be off. We'll return in the morning and begin again.
Inspector Broom and Sergeant Boswell exit. Lady Eleanor enters and approaches Sir Edward, but he turns his back. She abruptly exits. Nivens enters and turns off the lamp.
Leave it. I'll be a while longer. I have some matters to attend to.
Very good, sir. May I prepare a nightcap?
No, thank you. And good night, Nivens. You're my rock in a desert of shifting sand.
Nivens exits. Sir Edward sits at the desk and begins writing. A dark figure enters and crosses behind Sir Edward. The dark figure winds what looks like a cord around his or her hands and then quickly drops it over Sir Edward's head and chokes him to death. After a moment, Sir Edward slumps down, face forward on the desk. The dark figure retreats. End of Act 1, Scene 2. Intermission. Act 2, Scene 1. At Rise, it is mid-morning. Inspector Broom is writing up her notes while waiting for Sergeant Boswell, who is running late. The body has been removed. Since no one was prepared for an overnight stay, when everyone reappears on stage, they are dressed much the same as they were in the previous scene, but with subtle differences, except for Lady Eleanor, who appears in an extremely elegant nightgown and robe. Marty is seated on the sofa. Sergeant Boswell comes barreling in and immediately starts complaining.
I wish these hoity-toity high society snobs would hold off murdering each other long enough for a bloke to finish breakfast. I'm so bone-tired, I feel like I'm dragging my...
Alibis, Sergeant. We need to check everyone's alibis for the time of the murder. Get cracking now and no more of that language. I find it in poor taste.
Poor taste? You can bet when I find out who did these blinking murders, I personally will kill that son of a bitch.
Be sure to check the windows and doors for signs of a break-in, too. Without fail, someone will suggest this was the work of a local madman because it's simply not possible it could be one of them.
I wholeheartedly agree with you, ma'am. You know, I've found the landed gentry always stick together, no matter how serious the charge. The stories I could tell you.
I'd love to hear them, Sergeant. You can tell me all about it over a pint, but right now we've got work to do.
Sergeant Boswell exits. Inspector Broom sits opposite Marty.
Suppose you describe for me what happened this morning.
I came down early to lay out some letters for Sir Edward's signature. I was hoping to catch the morning post.
Earlier, you said you couldn't understand why anyone would kill Mr. No Money, but I believe Sir Edward was the intended victim. Think carefully. Who has a big enough reason to kill the judge and why?
No one comes to mind. It doesn't seem possible. It doesn't seem real. When I came in and saw Sir Edward sprawled across that desk, oh, it was horrible.
You didn't think to check if he was merely asleep or had taken ill?
No, I was too frightened. I think I screamed. That nice Paul Collier came in from over there.
After you screamed, how long did it take Mr. Collier to arrive?
Oh, almost immediately. He must have been on his way down. I guess he's an early riser like me.
Yes, that must be it. That will be all, Miss Pants. I'll need you to remain here at the manor for the time being. Ask Sir Percy to step in, if you please.
Marty exits. Sir Percy enters.
Sir Percy, I understand you called the police upon discovering the judge had been murdered. Is that correct?
Not exactly. I had to warn Paul not to touch the body. You see, he was about to do so. But I thought it prudent to wait for the police.
Good thinking, sir. Carry on.
I instructed Nivens to ring up the police and told everyone else to remain here.
So you arrived after Miss Pants and Mr. Collier, right? Who else was here?
Only myself, oh, well, and Lady Eleanor. We happened to come down at the same time. We were looking forward to our morning coffee when the commotion started. We heard a scream and came directly here.
Who arrived next?
Let's see. I'm not sure. I got distracted when Lady Eleanor nearly fainted. Paul helped me carry her to the sofa. It must have been the cook, because suddenly she was there with hot water and a towel for Lady Eleanor.
Did you notice anything unusual when you arrived? Something out of place or not quite right?
I'm afraid not. Although I remember thinking how curious everyone looked, still in their evening attire, like we'd just come from an all-night party. Now it feels like we're destined to live in these same clothes for an eternity.
You may be right about that. Since no one is leaving soon, I hope they will make the best of it. Thank you, Sir Percy. That's all for now.
Sir Percy exits. Sergeant Boswell enters and approaches Inspector Broom.
Anything to report, Sergeant?
You bet. Blimey, you wouldn't believe the spread they put on for breakfast around here.
I meant related to the case.
Now the place is buttoned up tight. Nothing doing with a break-in. Almost managed to nick a bit of toast and marmalade, except for that blinking cook hanging about keeping an eye on things.
I want you to interview Lady Eleanor while I have a look around. And Sergeant, behave yourself.
Inspector Bloom exits. Lady Eleanor sweeps in.
I know this is a difficult time, ma'am, but I need to ask you a few questions. Could you describe your relationship with Sir Edward?
I beg your pardon, Sergeant, but how is that remotely relevant to my husband's death? Shall I also describe what I had for breakfast? Would that be relevant as well?
Some of us haven't had the pleasure.
Huh?
If you're going to take that attitude, ma'am, then let's get right to it. Where were you when the judge expired?
I find your questions impertinent, Sergeant. However, I'm sure I was in bed when he was found. At least I don't recall being disturbed.
Disturb your sleep. Perish the thought. We wouldn't want that. So when was the last time you saw your husband alive?
Let me think. It was just before I went to bed. In fact, you and the inspector had just left.
That was around midnight. And you didn't see him again until the body was discovered this morning.
I remember Edward stayed up late to write some letters. Sir Percy and I happened to come down to breakfast at the same time. Actually, we didn't even get a chance to sit down when we heard a scream.
Did you two have an argument? You and the judge, that is.
We never argued. By mutual agreement, our disregard for one another was nearly perfect. He ignored me, and I did my best to avoid him.
That must get awkward when entertaining a house full of guests.
Really, Sergeant, you haven't a clue about the ways of the landed gentry. Let's just say I have my own particular interests, and I'm sure Edward had his. We left each other to our respective vices. Are you starting to get the picture?
The picture, yes, much clearer now that you mention it.
We live in hope.
With the judge now deceased, I assume you inherit the estate?
Of course I will. That is, along with Jane and her cousin Eddie.
Just so I'm clear, this Eddie person, he's not your son, but the judge's. By a previous marriage, I assume?
You assume correctly, Sergeant. What are you driving at?
Just that, in spite of your unusual relationship with the judge, you come out of this extremely well off. Allow me to be direct. Did you kill your husband for his money?
You insolent little man. How dare you suggest a thing? I shall report you to your superiors.
Oh, my superior. She's in the next room. Shall I get her? I still need an answer, madam. For the record, you're telling me you had no reason to want your husband dead.
Get out! Get out of here right now! I want to be alone.
Sergeant Boswell hurriedly exits. Sir Percy enters.
Darling, are you all right? I heard shouting.
That plodding policeman accused me of killing Edward.
Oh, he's trying to bluff you into making an admission. Did he offer any evidence?
No, but he sounded so confident that I did it, even after I threatened to inform his superiors about his outrageous behavior.
Then don't worry about it. He has nothing. We're still in the clear.
It's such a relief now that Edward is finally out of the way. I knew you wouldn't let me down, darling.
Hold on. I didn't kill Sir Edward. I thought you did.
You thought what? No, you were supposed to take care of that. You're the man, after all. Don't men take care of such things?
Not if you want to keep your neck out of a noose, you don't. It wasn't me who dispatched Sir Edward's. But if it wasn't you, then who?
Something's wrong, dreadfully wrong. If you didn't do it, and I know I didn't do it.
Marty enters and approaches Lady Eleanor and Sir Percy. They immediately stop talking.
I'm glad you're here. I was hoping to have a quiet word about my future here at Banfield Manor.
Oh, do you? A bit too soon to worry about that, isn't it? Not to mention inappropriate, but then I heard you lack a certain amount of discretion.
I'll get right to the point. I want to know what my options are now that Sir Edward is no longer with us.
I should have thought it obvious. Given the circumstances, your services are no longer needed. Goodbye.
On the contrary, I believe I could be very useful to you, perhaps as your personal secretary.
Well, what do I need with a secretary? That's nothing for you to do.
Why not keep me on as a loyal and silent employee rather than one with loose lips?
You jumped up, little tart. Do you know who you're speaking to? Show some respect.
It's just that I'm confused about what to do. Should I tell the police what they want to know, or should I keep silent because it's in the best interest of the Banfield family and for me as well? I'll let you make the choice.
Why should I do that?
It's simple. I overheard you two talking last evening. I know what you had in store for Sir Edward, and I must say the results were spectacular.
You're bluffing. If you knew anything, you'd go straight to the police.
I'm finding it hard to choose between that satisfied feeling you get when you've helped the police and that satisfied feeling you get when you know your future is secured.
You think we murdered my husband, do you? That's ridiculous. And what was our motive?
Money, of course. Financial security. And I want nothing more than what you want for yourself, only on a smaller scale.
Impertinent little. I should break your neck right now and be done with it.
Oh, but you won't. I've made certain arrangements. Should anything happen to me, You'll be the first ones the police come looking for, so don't threaten me, Sir Percy.
Let's all calm down, shall we? Now that Edward's gone, there's no reason why we can't all get what we want.
I was hoping you'd say that. I could be very useful to you once you inherit the estate.
But I won't inherit the entire estate. There's Jane and Eddie to consider.
I've been thinking about that. Sir Edward didn't have time to file a new will, right? And aren't there laws about not profiting from a crime?
Jane enters.
Sorry to intrude, but have you seen the inspector?
Well, she's obviously not here.
You'll forgive me for not staying, but I have to make funeral arrangements. Percy, be a dear and lend a hand.
Lady Eleanor and Sir Percy exit.
Well, isn't this convenient?
What is?
I was hoping we could have a chat.
We have nothing to say to one another. Thank you very much.
Oh, but we do. My friend at the bank, you remember the elf, don't you? So cute. She tells me you're one of their most frequent customers.
I warned you to stay out of my business.
Now, don't go making threats. You haven't heard the best part.
What is the best part?
Where you and I become partners. I want my share of all that lovely money you've been siphoning from the judge's account, or else. And just so you know, I've made certain provisions in case I should have an unfortunate accident. And like Sir Edward, I'm not so trusting. I've seen what you're capable of.
You think that preposterous. Why should I kill Sir Edward? Like you said, he trusted me.
Well, I don't. But if it wasn't you, then who?
I should think Eleanor and Percy are the most obvious suspects, but I would know about that. Now listen to me. Don't go saying crazy things to the police or anything. We can work something out. I need a couple days to make arrangements. Do we have a deal?
I can afford to be patient. I'm not the one under scrutiny, am I? And don't try any funny business, or Inspector Broom and I will have a nice little heart-to-heart chat.
Suddenly, Inspector Broom enters. Jane and Marty immediately stop talking.
Did someone mention my name? Ah, there you are, Miss Talifaro. I wanted to follow up with you, if I may.
I think I'll go somewhere else.
Marty exits.
I wanted a word with you too, Inspector. I have urgent business in London and will be away for a day or two.
I'm afraid that's not possible. Your presence is required here until we conclude our investigations.
You don't understand. There are financial matters that affect the judge's estate. I must get to the bank by tomorrow.
You're the one that doesn't understand. Let me be perfectly clear. If you attempt to leave, I will arrest you for obstructing my investigation.
If I don't get to London, then you'll have to explain any financial losses the estate suffers. Our solicitors will see to it.
Thanks for the warning, but I'll take my chances. Although, feel free to call whomever you need to speak to.
Ugh, fine, as you wish. But on your head be it. I believe you have more questions for me?
Yes, I do. Tell me, what is the current state of Sir Edward's holdings?
What do you mean?
It's simple enough. I'm trying to understand who gains by Sir Edward's death.
I get it, Inspector. You think I have a motive for killing him. It's true. I will inherit a sizable portion of the estate, but so will Lady Eleanor. We are, after all, his only surviving heirs. But I categorically deny I had anything to do with my uncle's death.
Not the only heir, Miss Talifaro. There's your cousin, Eddie. He also has a claim to the estate, does he not?
Not if the existing will is still valid, which means Eddie has no legal claim. However, I will see to it he is well provided for. It's the right thing to do. After all, he's family.
How very generous of you. Do you think Lady Eleanor will be as accommodating?
If she were given the entire state, it still wouldn't be enough. There's no amount that could ever satisfy our Eleanor.
Do you believe she's capable of murder?
I wouldn't rule it out. She is focused solely on self-preservation. Do yourself a favor, Inspector. Never get between Eleanor and what she wants out of life.
I'll remember that. This is on a completely different topic, if you don't mind. I was admiring your scarf. It's very becoming on you.
Well, thank you, Inspector. Since none of us came prepared, Lady Eleanor generously made her wardrobe available, and thank God for low-heeled shoes. Those high heels were killing my feet.
I love the bold colors. It somehow changes your entire look. Although, against that black dress, you couldn't go wrong.
Oh, it's no big thing, really. A splash of color here, a small addition there, a bit of jewelry, and voila, a whole new ensemble. Unlike a gentleman's attire, they can get away with wearing the same old tweeds and old school ties every day of the week, and it wouldn't matter.
Oh, I agree. Men don't have to try at all, but then who would notice? I've never been successful at coordinating colors or accessories. Besides, police regulations don't allow for individual creativity.
If I may say, without offense, go lightly on the makeup. It's the one time where less is more, so to speak.
Inspector Broom hurriedly takes out a handkerchief to scrub the excess rouge from her cheeks.
I hadn't realized. Oh, how embarrassing. I told you I'm no good at this. Thank you, Miss Teleferro. Thank you very much. May I call you Jane?
Oh, no, you may not. Getting a bit too familiar, aren't we?
Oh, I'm sorry. Well then, that's all for now. And remember what I said. Do not attempt to leave Miss Teleferro.
Jane exits. Inspector Broom wipes her face some more, then scribbles in her notebook. The hall door opens and Cook stands silently in the doorway until Inspector Broom finally takes notice of her.
Can you spare a moment for me?
Please come in. How may I help?
I don't want any more trouble, that's all. With Mr. Harold being poisoned and the sergeant finding that arsenic in my kitchen, and now the judge. Something's been bothering me all morning, and I think you should know about it.
By all means, please tell me what's troubling you.
It's my kitchen, see? I mean, it's mine. I do all the cooking around here. I serve the food and clean up the messes. Nothing leaves my kitchen that I don't serve myself. It's always been that way.
Okay, we've established the kitchen is your private domain. What are you trying to say?
Private domain. Yes, that's it. So if the kitchen is my domain, as you say, then why was my stove still warm this morning when I went to prepare breakfast?
I don't understand. Isn't that what stoves do? They get hot enough for cooking, and after you're done, they eventually cool down. So what?
My stove is never warm when I come down to start breakfast. The first thing I have to do is stoke it up before I begin cooking. It's what I always do. This morning, the stove is still warm to the touch. So I asked myself, why?
Why indeed. And what conclusions did you come to?
Somebody was in my kitchen last night. Maybe they wanted some warm milk or a pot of coffee. But then I noticed the service tray was untouched and there were no cups or saucers in the sink for me to clean up.
Maybe whoever prepared the hot drink also cleaned up afterwards. Was that not possible?
That's a laugh. This lot can barely clean their own backsides, much less clean up after themselves. No one ever comes downstairs. Yet the night the judge gets knocked off, someone's roaming around my kitchen doing who knows what.
And you have no idea who it might have been.
Not at all. That's why I wanted you to know before someone tries to frame me again for something I didn't do.
Very interesting, if I may say so.
You can say whatever you like. Just put it in your notebook that Cook had nothing to do with these goings-on in the middle of the night. Go ahead, write it down.
You can be sure I'll make a note of it. It's an extraordinary event, to say the least.
Cook exits. Paul enters.
Inspector, if you have a moment, when will we be allowed to leave this dreadful place? If this is what passes for country hospitality, they can keep it.
Like everyone else, Mr. Collier, your presence is required until we conclude our investigations.
I've spent years cooped up against my will, but not a minute longer. You can reach me at the Boar's Head Inn in the village. Perhaps I'll get a good night's sleep there.
I strongly advise you not to leave. Tell me, did you not sleep well last night?
Not a week. And now there are 2 murders, and the weekend's only half over. I felt safer in prison compared with this.
If you couldn't sleep, what did you do? Did you leave your room at any time?
I stayed in bed listening to the rain all night.
You didn't, for instance, go down to the kitchen for a late night snack?
As I said, I was in bed.
Other than the storm, did you hear anything that could help pinpoint the exact time of the murder?
I'm afraid not, Inspector. I was in the West Wing and the murder occurred in the main part of the house. The pounding rain and thunder drowned out any noises.
What time did you come down this morning?
I can't be precise. It was early, say 7 o'clock. As I came down the stairs, I heard a scream. When I entered the room, I saw the judge slumped over at the desk and Marty standing nearby in a frenzy.
You say you entered the great room from the hall door.
Yes, that's correct.
But your room is in the west wing. Why didn't you come from that direction?
I got lost, didn't I? It's a big house. I missed the back stairs and ended up wandering the halls until I came to the main staircase. The one that lives straight out the front door. Would have left too. I heard Marty cry out.
You'd have left without paying your respects to your host? That wouldn't have been proper etiquette, now would it, Mr. Collier?
Who cares? Let's face it, I don't have a penny to my name, and I spent the last 2 days in the only clothes I own. I don't have a manservant to lay out a new suit for every occasion.
No offense, but a change of clothes would be a good start. Of all people, why did you accept the judge's invitation?
Call it morbid curiosity if you like.
What did you hope to gain?
When the judge sent word he wanted to meet me, I couldn't believe it at first, but I decided to take him up on his offer. After prison, a few days in the country sounded like heaven. Shows how little I know.
If you hadn't come here, where would you have gone?
I grew up in a small village called Wesley, south of here. I was hoping someone who knew my family before I got sent away would give me a job. When in need, there's no place like home, right, Inspector?
I suppose so. Your mother, she's no longer living?
She passed while I was locked up. I'm convinced she died of the shame I caused her. I'll never forgive myself for that.
And your father, what happened to him?
I heard he might have gone into service.
You mean domestic service? Did you try to trace him? There's always the labor exchange.
He never once visited me in prison. I'm not sure where he ended up, and I don't care. It doesn't matter now.
I'm sorry for your loss. I suggest you focus on the future, Mr. Collier. New beginnings and all that. What's done is done.
We can't change our past, but we can right old wrongs.
What do you mean by that?
Just that I stirred up a lot of trouble years ago. Now I hope to live a blameless life to make up for my mistakes.
I'm sure you'll be fine. Regarding the judge, you claim to have no animosity toward him, but that's not true, is it?
The truth is I hated the old man. He stole the best years of my life from me like he's done to others. Surprised it took this long for someone to catch up to him.
Whoever killed Sir Edward is in this house. I'm convinced of that. Among this small circle of people, is there anyone you strongly suspect?
I'd say you're spoiled for choices, Inspector, but pick anyone. Although there is one who appeared deeply affected when the judge announced his son's return. I sensed the underlying panic.
Don't keep me in suspense. Who is it?
Miss Taliaferro, the judge's niece. She's hiding something, of that I'm quite sure.
At that moment, a loud crash is heard in the front hall. Marty staggers into the guest room and collapses. Inspector Broom and Paul rush to her side. Paul wraps an arm around her shoulders to lift and cradle her as she starts to revive. What happened, Miss Pants? Are you all right?
Now, in the hall, a vase missed my head by inches. Someone tried to kill me.
Act 2, Scene 2. Moments later, Paul still cradles Marty in his arms with Inspector Broom standing over them. Sergeant Boswell and Sir Percy enter on the run and stop upon seeing everyone.
I heard a crash. Are you all right, Inspector?
Quickly, Sergeant, the hall. Someone tried to kill Miss Pants.
Well, it's no use. They're gone by now. That vase must have fallen from the second floor. It was so close. I'm going to be next, aren't I, Inspector? Oh, please, I don't want to die.
Get everyone in here now, Sergeant. No one leaves this room until I say so.
Sergeant Boswell exits to summon the remaining household. The others arrive and form a semicircle around Inspector Broom.
I want to know your exact movements for the past few minutes, beginning with you, Miss Taliaferro.
I was in my room when I heard the crash, but I was nowhere near the stairwell, I swear it.
And where were you, Lady Yellow?
I was in my bedroom as well. I thought a small bomb had gone off. Really, Inspector, I do not appreciate being grilled in this manner.
How about you?
I was in the kitchen, of course. Somebody's got to serve breakfast.
I could make do with an egg.
Please focus on something other than your stomach, Sergeant.
Just saying.
And you, Nivens, where were you when Miss Pants was nearly killed?
I was polishing the silver in my pantry. See for yourself. I left everything as it was when the sergeant came for me.
It's true, I can attest to that.
Not one of you thought to investigate when the vase came crashing down?
It's nothing to do with me. That's what I pay the servants to do. Sort out these trifling matters.
Trifling matter? Thanks a lot. I was nearly killed. Now that we're all here, Inspector, perhaps you can tell us when we're allowed to leave. We're like sitting ducks getting picked off one by one.
There is a killer loose in this very house, and he or she is one of you. I should think you'd be a bit more concerned about finding out who it is. Let's take a moment to assess the situation, shall we? First, Mr. Harold No Money was poisoned to death in a botched attempt on Sir Edward's life. Shortly afterwards, the Lord of the Manor himself is killed in a brutal manner.
Don't forget, someone tampered with the evidence. The champagne glass didn't clean itself and hop back on the shelf.
Right, Sergeant. And there's the arsenic taken from the gardener's shed. All of you had the means and opportunity. In time, I'm sure we'll establish each of you had a motive for murder as well.
That's total nonsense, Inspector. I had no motive for killing my husband.
Ah, now that's where you're full of
Shall we stick to the facts, Sergeant? Just the facts, if you please.
Okay, let's talk motive. I have Sir Edward's letter to his solicitors, where he planned to leave his entire estate to his son. The rest of you, including Nivens and Cook, still would have inherited but your legacies were significantly reduced. The letter was never sent. There's your motive.
Your entire case is based on gratuitous accusations.
On the contrary, Sir Edward suspected you and Sir Percy were conspiring against him. It looks to me like his suspicions were well founded.
Let's not pretend Edward cared all that much for me. I was merely an ornament to make him look good wherever we went. The noble judge was an insecure little man who abused his power over people whenever he could.
Now that he's out of the way, your pampered lifestyle can continue unabated. I'd call that a credible motive.
Be careful about throwing around accusations you cannot prove, Inspector. There are strict laws against slander in this country, as you well know.
Sir Edward knew his wife was having an affair with his so-called friend. Had the judge lived to file a new will, she would have inherited almost nothing when the prodigal son returned. Could your relationship survive the strain? I think not.
Eddie's return has no bearing. As his wife and heir, I'm entitled to a significant portion of Edward's estate, the same as Jane.
Don't drag me into your little drama. Besides, the will was signed well before we knew Eddie was still alive. It remains valid and practically set in stone.
That settles it. There was no reason for anyone here to kill Sir Edward.
It settles nothing. I submit Sir Edward was murdered to prevent him changing his will in favor of his son.
It had to be the work of some lunatic on the loose, Inspector. It couldn't have been any of us here.
By God, it's just like you called it, Inspector.
Called it? Who's that? Called what?
The inspector predicted one of you would claim the murders were committed by some madman. She warned someone would try that old trick.
Are you mocking us, Inspector? Do you think this is some sort of parlor game? I suggest you start taking these murders more seriously.
I do take them seriously, just as I know the murderer is here now in this very room. Whoever it is, they've killed twice already, and they are willing to kill again. Just ask Miss Pants about that.
Then I want police protection now. I can't take it anymore. I'll tell you what you want to know. Just don't let them kill me.
Miss Pants, are you confessing to the murders of Sir Edward Banfield and Mr. Harold No Money?
I knew it. I knew the little hussy was the murderer.
No, not me. Let me explain. Last night, I overheard Lady Eleanor and Sir Percy planning to do away with the judge. And sure enough, this morning, he's dead. You two murdered Sir Edward.
She's making it all up.
Everyone, quiet! Help me understand, Miss Pants. To what exactly are you confessing?
When I found the judge dead, I said to myself, they've gone and done it. I saw an opportunity to make a little money, so I suggested they could buy my silence. After all, I have to look after my own interests, don't I?
Blackmail, is it? The dirtiest game in the book.
And who's to say she wouldn't come back for more? So you decided to end it right away. From 2 floors, that vase would have silenced your blackmailer forever. Isn't that true, Lady Eleanor?
I did no such thing. And besides, she had it coming. It's true the little tart tried to blackmail me, but I'm not the only one who wants her dead.
You really want to kill me? But I thought we had agreed. And to think I was going to tell you about the rest of the money. I was a fool to trust you.
What money? What are you babbling on about?
Yes, I'd love to know too.
It was Jane. She's been stealing from the judge all along. I have a friend at the bank who can confirm it.
Let's tell the whole story, shall we? Eleanor and Percy weren't the only ones being blackmailed. What little Miss Marty Pants couldn't possibly know is Sir Edward had me open a separate account, what he called his slush fund, but she would know about that because she's a complete ninny.
How convenient the judge isn't here to confirm or dispute your word. That's why you were so desperate to get to London. To put back the money you stole and thereby remove any threat Miss Pants held over you. It was your secret account, wasn't it? Tell the truth.
All right. I admit it's true. She thought she was going to waltz in and take half for herself. Well, she got lucky once, but I wouldn't have missed a second time.
There you have it. Means, motive, and opportunity. I submit Lady Eleanor, with help from Miss Taliaferro and Sir Percy, you three murdered the judge and Harold No Money and attempted to murder Miss Marty Pants.
Total chaos erupts, each talking over the other.
It was attempted
So
murder.
much yelling and
Nothing.
finger pointing.
Quiet, please.
Everyone stops talking. Inspector Broom puts a hand to her forehead and takes a few steps around the stage as if deep in thought while everyone watches.
Of course, that's it. I've got it now.
Are you okay, Inspector? Would you like a glass of water? Something stronger, perhaps?
Sergeant, isn't it gratifying to know one's suspicions are spot on?
I'm not sure, ma'am. How so?
I couldn't remember what it was that kept bothering me, but it suddenly came to me while everyone was talking. It's crystal clear to me now. The missing pieces are finally in place. That is, knowing about your embezzlement and attempt to kill Miss Pants, and you two conspiring to murder Sir Edward, and of course your little blackmail scheme. But in spite of all this, none of it explains two murders, now does it?
Sorry, ma'am. I know I speak for everyone here when I say I'm totally lost. Are you telling us you know who killed Sir Edward and Mr. No Money?
Yes, Sergeant. And you would too if you had been paying attention. To be fair, I missed it at first. From the start, someone's been orchestrating this whole ghastly business. But there was some small detail I missed. Then I remembered what Miss Taliaferro said.
Me? What was it I said?
It was when you showed me how to accessorize and how small changes can be so dramatic, like your scarf and Miss Pants with her pearls and colorful sweater. So subtle yet so highly effective.
It's not hard, really. Every woman knows how to enhance her looks without too much trouble. Well, most women, anyway.
You mentioned Lady Eleanor had provided access to her wardrobe. That was most generous of you too, milady.
A common courtesy. I know it's distressing to be out of one's element.
Thanks to our fashion expert, Miss Taliaferro, I now realize what I had missed. For instance, take Lady Eleanor's stylish gown and robe. Of course, she could change clothes anytime she wanted. It's her home. Her guests, however, didn't have it so easy. But with access to her wardrobe, Miss Taliaferro and Miss Pants could accessorize to their heart's content. It was these subtle changes that helped me identify the murderer. It was you, Mr. Collier. You murdered Sir Edward.
Well, that's not true. Oh, sure, I hated the miserable old do-gooder, but I didn't kill him. It was one of them.
That's plausible, sir, but not possible. I finally realized what was different about you. If a subtle change can have such a dramatic effect on the ladies, it could equally apply to the men. And that's when I knew I had you. Your tie, sir. It's impossible that the tie you're wearing now is the same one you wore when you first arrived.
This is absurd. I told you I've been in the same clothes for the past 2 days. I might be sick of them, but they're all I got.
Inspector is absolutely correct. I should have noticed that particular pattern before. That's our old school tie you're wearing. the boating club. Unless, of course, you want to convince us that you rode for Cambridge.
You used your own tie to strangle the judge, but what did you do with it? Where did you dispose of the evidence?
My stove. It was still warm this morning after he burned it up. I'll bet we can still find the ashes.
But you still had a problem, Mr. Collier. Without being too obvious, you had to replace your tie with one similar to it. The only person who could provide that kind of assistance was you, Mr. Nivens.
It's simply Nivens, ma'am, as I've told you before.
Nevertheless, Nivens, you had us going in all the wrong directions. You knew the judge had invited an ex-con to demonstrate his alleged instincts into human nature. And you said the household was best understood when viewed through the prism of money. You also alluded to trouble between Miss Taliaferro and Miss Pants, and that Cook had something to hide. And you mistakenly poisoned Mr. No Money, then returned the glass to the cupboard. Therefore, it stands to reason you replaced Mr. Collier's tie and helped him destroy the evidence. Your only mistake was choosing a tie that held significance for certain people. You may ask why Nivens would help an ex-con to commit murder, and there can only be one explanation. Nivens is Paul's father.
What?
What?
Think about it.
I don't believe it.
Father and son separated for years because the judge was a manipulating old fool at heart. Even with Paul's early release, the damage was done. This was payback for all those lost years. I'm right, aren't I, Nivens?
I hated Sir Edward for what he did to Paul and my poor wife. When a position opened here at the manor, I jumped at the chance. Then we learned Paul would be paroled early, and the judge invited him to gauge the effect his sentence had on Paul. The judge's ego got the better of him. Of course, I knew about the arsenic in the shed, but so did everyone else. I left it down in the kitchen sink in case the police figured out it was poison and came looking for the evidence. Then it all went horribly wrong. I hadn't counted on the storm. I went to start the generator and was out of the room when everyone selected a champagne glass. I wasn't there to ensure the judge had the correct one. Mr. No Money, unfortunately, chose the wrong glass. When the judge decided to stay up late, making out changes to his will, it was the perfect opportunity to carry out our plan.
I took the back way and came around the main stairs to the hall door. I knew the judge would have his back to me. It couldn't have been easier. I slipped the tie around his neck and voila. And then I had to get rid of the evidence. Father suggested the stove. We didn't stop to think about old school ties, did we? Of all the ones to choose from, I had to pick that one.
Well, you almost got away with it, son, except for a lousy thunderstorm.
And the old school tie. Like the hymn says, blessed be the tie that binds. Take them down to the station, Sergeant.
With pleasure, ma'am. Everybody out. I've got a nice police van waiting out front. By the way, Inspector, I believe I owe you a pint. And have I got some great stories to tell you?
I will gladly take you up on it, Sergeant. I believe we deserve a pint or two.
Sergeant Boswell grandly holds the door for Inspector Broom as she exits, then closes the hall door behind him. After a few seconds, Sergeant Boswell quietly sneaks back on stage. He moves down center to address the audience directly.
Hello, everyone. Well, what do you think? Not a bad score, eh? 2 done for murder, 2 more for conspiracy to commit murder, 1 for embezzlement and attempted murder, and another for blackmail. I guess you could say the inspector and me, we make a pretty good team. She's still a bit green, but she'll get better once I've had a chance to work with her. Don't you worry, though. We'll be back soon. On that, you can bet your derriere.
End of play.